The morning on Station Harmony began like every other morning for the past 7 years. Ambassador Daniel Harper woke up in his small quarters, drank his coffee, and prepared himself for another day of being ignored by the galaxy. Earth had joined the Galactic Council 53 years ago. Humanity had been so excited back then. They thought they were entering a new era of peace and cooperation. They thought the older species would welcome them and help them grow. They were wrong. Daniel remembered reading the history files during his training. The first human ambassadors had arrived at the council with hope in their hearts. They had brought gifts and speeches about friendship. The alien representatives had listened politely and then gone back to their own business. Humanity was too young, they said, too primitive, too emotional. Earth would need to prove itself worthy of respect, and that would take centuries. But humanity did not have centuries. The Velkar Dominion had noticed the new species on the galactic stage. They had seen opportunity. The Velkar were predators in every sense of the word. Their empire had grown through conquest and intimidation for over 2,000 years. They took what they wanted and crushed anyone who resisted. When they looked at humanity, they saw easy prey. The raids began small. A cargo ship would disappear near the border. A mining outpost would go silent. The humans would complain to the council, and the council would promise to investigate. Nothing ever happened. Daniel had been a junior diplomat when the raids started getting worse. He remembered sitting in the council chamber, watching his senior ambassador plead for intervention. The Velkari representative had denied everything with a smile on his face. The council had ruled that there was insufficient evidence to take action. 300 humans had died that year. The next year, the number was 500, then 1,000. Then it stopped mattering because the galaxy had made its position clear. Human lives were not worth protecting. Daniel became the senior ambassador 5 years ago. By then, he had learned to hide his anger behind a pleasant smile. He had learned to speak softly and thank the council for their consideration, even when they did nothing. He had learned to be exactly what the galaxy expected from a human diplomat. Polite, harmless, and ultimately irrelevant. But something had been building inside him. Something had been building inside all of humanity. The galaxy just could not see it yet. On this particular morning, Daniel was preparing for a routine diplomatic reception when his communicator buzzed. He glanced at the message and felt his blood turn cold. The colony on Kepler 440b had been destroyed. Not raided, not damaged. Destroyed completely. The Velkari had sent a fleet of warships and burned everything to ash. 30,000 human settlers were dead. 7,000 of them had been children. Daniel stood very still for a long moment. He read the message again, making sure he understood every word. Then he read the attached casualty report. Scrolling through page after page of names. Families, teachers, farmers, engineers, all. Of them gone because the galaxy had decided that human lives did not matter. He put down his communicator and looked at himself in the mirror. His face showed nothing. 7 years of diplomatic training had taught him how to keep his emotions hidden. But behind his calm expression, something fundamental had shifted. He went to the reception anyway. He smiled and shook hands and made small talk with alien diplomats who had no idea what had happened. The news would take a few hours to spread through official channels. For now, Daniel was the only one in the room who knew. Ambassador Zalith of the Torvani approached him with a drink in his manipulator arms. The Torvani were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They considered themselves wise and enlightened, guardians of galactic civilization. In reality, they were just skilled at maintaining their own comfort while others suffered. Ambassador Harper Zalith said in his deep, rumbling voice, "How pleasant to see you. I trust Earth is doing well." Daniel smiled. "Earth is doing wonderfully, High Arbiter. Thank you for asking." "Excellent. We so enjoy having humanity as part of our galactic community. Your species brings such enthusiasm to everything you do." Daniel kept smiling. He thought about 30,000 dead colonists. He thought about the children who had been burned alive while the galaxy looked the other way. He thought about 53 years of being treated like animals. "We are grateful for the opportunity to learn from the elder species," he said. "Earth has so much to gain from the Council's wisdom." Owlith made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Indeed, do enjoy the reception, Ambassador. I believe the catering this evening is quite exceptional." Daniel watched him walk away. He finished his drink slowly. Then he excused himself and returned to his quarters. For the next 3 hours, Daniel sat alone in the dark. He was not grieving, though he had every right to grieve. He was thinking. He was making decisions that would change the course of galactic history. When he finally stood up, he knew exactly what he needed to do. He opened a secure channel to Earth. The face of President Maria Santos appeared on his screen. Her eyes red from crying. She had already received the full report. "Daniel," she said, "tell me you have something? Anything." "I do, Madam President. But I need to know if we are ready to commit. There will be no going back after this." Maria was silent for a long moment. "The Security Council has already voted. We are done asking for permission. We are done begging for scraps of justice. Whatever you need to do, you have full authorization." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then I will call an emergency assembly of the Galactic Council. I will need 72 hours to prepare." "What are you going to tell them?" Daniel thought about the question carefully before answering. "I am going to tell them the truth, Madam President. I am going to show them what humanity really is. And I am going to make sure they never forget it." He ended the call and began composing the formal request for an emergency assembly. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. For the first time in 7 years, Daniel Harper felt like he was actually doing something that mattered. The request went out to every ambassador in the Galactic Council. The topic was listed simply as a formal statement regarding galactic security. It was vague enough to generate curiosity but not alarm. The alien diplomats would attend out of boredom more than concern. They had no idea what was coming. 3 days. Daniel had 3 days to prepare the most important speech in human history. 3 days to decide exactly how much to reveal and how much to keep hidden. 3 days to transform himself from a forgettable diplomat into something the galaxy would remember forever. He started writing, and he did not stop until the sun rose over Station Harmony. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in orbit around the ancient Torvani homeworld. A massive dome of crystalline metal that could hold representatives from over 400 species at once. The Torvani had designed it 3,000 years ago, and they had designed it with one purpose in mind. They wanted everyone who entered to feel small. Daniel Harper stood outside the main entrance and looked up at the towering doors. They were carved with images of the founding species, the ancient civilizations that had created the Council when humanity was still living in caves. Every detail was meant to remind younger species of their place in the galaxy. "You are nothing," the architecture seemed to say. "You are newcomers in a universe that does not care about you." Daniel had walked through these doors hundreds of times. He had always felt the weight of that message pressing down on him. Today was different. Today he felt nothing but cold determination. He was alone. No aides walked beside him. No assistants carried documents or prepared notes. The other ambassadors had arrived with their full delegations, surrounded by advisors and translators and security personnel. Daniel had sent his entire staff back to their quarters. What he was about to do required no assistance. The chamber was already filling up when he entered. Over 300 species had sent representatives to this emergency assembly. Most of them had come out of curiosity. A few had come because they sensed something unusual was happening. None of them understood what they were about to witness. Daniel walked down the central aisle toward the speaking podium. The floor was made of polished stone that reflected the lights from above, creating the illusion of walking on stars. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. And slowly the background chatter began to fade as the assembled diplomats noticed his approach. He could feel their eyes on him. Some were confused. Some were amused. A few of the older ambassadors wore expressions of mild irritation, annoyed that a human had interrupted their schedules for what would surely be another pointless complaint. The Velkari delegation sat in their designated section near the front of the chamber. Their leader, a massive creature named Krethver, watched Daniel with obvious contempt. The Valkyrie were reptilian in appearance, covered in dark scales that shifted color with their moods. Right now, Krethver's scales were a deep shade of purple that indicated amusement. Daniel reached the podium and placed his hands on the smooth surface. He took a moment to look around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as he could. He wanted them to remember this moment. He wanted them to remember exactly what they were thinking before everything changed. Hi. Arbiter Zalith rose from his elevated seat at the head of the chamber. His voice boomed through the translation systems that allowed all species to understand each other. This emergency assembly has been called at the request of the human delegation. Ambassador Harper, the Council recognizes Earth. You may state your purpose. Daniel did not respond immediately. The silence stretched for several seconds, and he could see confusion spreading through the chamber. This was not how diplomatic speeches usually began. Most ambassadors rushed to fill the silence with flowery greetings and expressions of gratitude. Daniel simply stood there, letting the tension build when he finally spoke. His voice was calm and measured. Humanity has come to this chamber seeking justice. He paused again, letting the words settle. We have followed your protocols. We have respected your traditions. We have submitted formal complaints through proper channels. We have waited patiently while committees reviewed evidence that should have been obvious to anyone with eyes. We have watched our people suffer and die while this council debated procedural technicalities. The chamber had gone very quiet. This was not the tone they expected from humans. Humans were supposed to be humble and apologetic. They were supposed to acknowledge their youth and inexperience. They were not supposed to sound like this. Today, I am not here to beg, Daniel continued. I am not here to submit another complaint that will be ignored. I am not here to ask for your help, or your sympathy, or your understanding. He had. I'd been debating, straightened his posture, and lifted his chin. I am here to inform this council that the United Earth government has officially declared war on the Valkyrie Dominion. For a moment, nothing happened. The words seemed to hang in the air, too absurd to process. Then the chamber erupted. Ambassadors leaped to their feet, shouting in dozens of languages. Translation systems struggled to keep up with the chaos. Several representatives rushed toward the exits, desperate to contact their home governments. Others simply stared at Daniel with expressions of pure disbelief. Krethver's laughter cut through the noise like a blade. The Valkyrie ambassador rose from his seat, his scales now bright red with mockery. War. Krethver bellowed, his voice drowning out the other sounds. Did the human just say war? He turned to address the rest of the chamber, spreading his massive arms wide. This primitive creature threatens the Valkyrie Dominion with war. The species that could not even defend a single farming colony thinks it can challenge an empire that has existed for 2,000 years. He looked back at Daniel, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement.
Tell me,
Human, what army do you plan to fight us with? Your cargo ships? Your mining vessels? Perhaps you will throw rocks at our warships and hope for the best. The laughter spread through the chamber. Even species that had no particular fondness for the Valkyrie found the situation amusing. The idea of humanity declaring war on anyone was simply too ridiculous to take seriously. Daniel waited for the laughter to die down. He did not seem offended or embarrassed. If anything, he seemed to be enjoying himself. Ambassador Krethver raises an excellent point, he said when the chamber had quieted enough for him to be heard. Humanity has always appeared weak. We have always appeared harmless. We have given the galaxy every reason to believe that we pose no threat to anyone. He smiled. And something about that smile made Krethfer's laughter catch in his throat. I wonder if any of you have ever asked yourselves why that might be. The chamber went silent again. Daniel looked around at the assembled representatives, and his smile grew wider. I wonder if any of you have ever considered that perhaps we wanted you to believe we were weak. Perhaps we wanted you to underestimate us. Perhaps while you were laughing at our complaints and ignoring our suffering, we were preparing for exactly this moment. Krethfer's scales had begun to shift from red to a pale yellow. Among the Velkari, yellow indicated uncertainty. What are you saying, human? He demanded. Daniel tilted his head slightly, as if considering how best to answer the question. I am saying, Ambassador, that humanity has been lying to you. All of you. For a very long time, he touched a control on the podium, and the lights in the chamber began to dim. Allow me to show you what I mean. The lights in the grand chamber dimmed until the only illumination came from the holographic projector above the central podium. Every eye in the room was fixed on Daniel Harper. Waiting to see what the human would do next, Daniel let the silence stretch for a few more seconds. He had practiced this moment in his mind 1,000 times over the past 3 days. He knew exactly which words to use and exactly when to use them. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity was truly capable of, and he wanted them to remember every detail. 17 years ago, he began, his voice echoing through the darkened chamber. This council passed Resolution 7749, for those who may have forgotten. That resolution restricted military development for all species classified as emerging civilizations. Humanity was included in that category. He paused and looked toward High Arbiter Zolith. We signed that resolution in good faith. We opened our shipyards to council inspectors. We allowed your observers to examine every vessel we built. We provided detailed reports on our military capabilities every single year. On paper, humanity possessed exactly what you expected us to possess. A small defensive fleet. Basic weapons systems. Nothing that could threaten anyone. Krethfer had recovered some of his confidence. His scales shifted back toward purple as he interrupted. Yes, we are all aware that humans followed the rules like obedient children. What is your point? Daniel turned to face him directly. My point, Ambassador, is that we lied.
Hey.
The chamber stirred with confused murmurs. Daniel continued before anyone could interrupt again. The fleet that your inspectors examined was real. The ships were real. The weapons were real. But that fleet represented perhaps 5% of our actual military capability. He touched another control on the podium, and the holographic display came to life above his head. The image showed a star map of the galaxy, with Earth marked by a small blue dot near the outer edge. 17 years ago, when we signed Resolution 7749, we knew exactly what it meant. We knew that the galaxy would never allow us to build a military force capable of defending ourselves. We knew that the Velkari would continue their raids and that the Council would continue to do nothing. We knew that our only hope for survival was to prepare in secret. The star map zoomed out, revealing vast stretches of empty space between the spiral arms of the galaxy. The deep void, Daniel said, the spaces between stars where no one travels because there is nothing there, no planets, no resources, no reason for anyone to look. That is where we built our real fleet. He touched the control again, and the image changed. The assembled representatives gasped as one. Several ambassadors made sounds of disbelief in their native languages. Even High Arbiter Zalith leaned forward in his seat, his ancient eyes wide with shock. The hologram showed a fleet, not a small defensive force, not a modest collection of patrol vessels. This was an armada beyond anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Thousands of ships arranged in precise formations, their hulls bristling with weapons that no one in the chamber recognized. The United Earth Navy, Daniel announced, currently consists of 12,000 combat-ready vessels. This includes 400 Dreadnought-class carriers, each one capable of deploying 500 autonomous fighter craft. It includes 2,000 heavy cruisers armed with weapons systems that we developed in complete secrecy. It includes support vessels, troop transports, and medical ships sufficient to sustain extended military operations across multiple star systems. Krethver had gone completely pale. His scales were now a sickly shade of white that Daniel had never seen before on a Valkyrie. "This is impossible," Krethver stammered. "Your species does not have the resources. You do not have the technology. This must be a fabrication." "I understand your skepticism," Daniel replied calmly. "After all, humanity has spent decades convincing you that we were primitive and weak. Allow me to address your concerns." The hologram shifted again, showing technical specifications and construction records. The resources came from asteroid mining operations in uninhabited systems. We registered these operations as scientific research missions studying stellar formation. Your inspectors never thought to examine them closely. The technology came from our own scientists, working in laboratories that officially did not exist. Humanity has been investing roughly 40% of our total economic output into secret military development for the past 17 years. He let that number sink in before continuing. 40%. While your inspectors were counting our visible ships and congratulating themselves on keeping the young species under control, we were building an empire in the darkness. Ambassador Zalith finally found his voice. "This is a violation of galactic law. This is a direct violation of Resolution 7749. Earth will face consequences for this deception." Daniel turned to face the High Arbiter, and his expression hardened. "Consequences?" he repeated. "You wish to speak to me about consequences?" He stepped away from the podium and walked toward the Torvani section of the chamber. "High Arbiter, in the past 17 years, the Valkyrie Dominion has killed over 40,000 human citizens. They have enslaved approximately 12,000 more. They have destroyed 17 colonies and raided over 200 civilian vessels. Each time, humanity came to this chamber and asked for help. Each time, you told us to be patient. Each time, you did nothing." His voice rose slightly, the first sign of real emotion he had shown. 3 days ago, the Valkyrie burned Kepler-4 to B2 ash. 30,000 people died, including 7,000 children. Children, High Arbiter. Babies who had never harmed anyone. And do you know what this council did in response? He gestured at the empty space around him. Nothing. You did nothing. You sent a formal expression of concern and promised to investigate. That is what human lives are worth to this council. A formal expression of concern? He walked back to the podium, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "So yes, we violated Resolution 7749. We lied to your inspectors. We built a secret fleet in defiance of galactic law. And I will tell you something else. High Arbiter." He placed his hands on the podium and leaned forward. "We do not regret it. Not for one moment. Because the galaxy taught us a very important lesson over the past 50 years. The galaxy taught us that laws only protect the powerful. The galaxy taught us that justice only exists for those who can enforce it. The galaxy taught us that if we wanted to survive, we would have to be strong enough to protect ourselves." He straightened up and adjusted his jacket. "Well, we are strong enough now, and the Valkyrie are about to discover exactly what that means." The hologram above the podium shifted one more time, showing the Valkyrie homeworld surrounded by red targeting indicators. "You have 30 standard days to surrender," Daniel said, looking directly at Krethvar. "I suggest you use that time wisely." The grand chamber exploded into chaos the moment Daniel finished speaking. Ambassadors were screaming into their communicators, desperately trying to reach their home governments. Some were pushing toward the exits, trampling over each other in their panic. Others sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Daniel remained at the podium, watching the madness unfold with a calm expression. He had expected this reaction. The galaxy had spent so long treating humanity as insignificant that the sudden reversal had broken something in their collective understanding. They did not know how to respond to a universe where humans were dangerous. The Valkyrie delegation was in complete disarray. Several of the junior diplomats had already fled the chamber, their scales flashing through every color of fear and confusion. Only Krethvar remained in his seat, staring at Daniel with an expression that shifted between rage and terror. High Arbiter Zalith was pounding his manipulator arms against his podium. He's trying to restore order. His voice boomed through the translation systems, but no one was listening. The carefully maintained dignity of the Galactic Council had shattered like glass. It took nearly 15 minutes for the chamber to calm down enough for anyone to speak. By then, half the ambassadors had left to make emergency reports to their governments. The ones who remained looked at Daniel with entirely new expressions: fear, respect, calculation. Krethver finally rose from his seat. His scales had settled into a dull gray color that Daniel did not recognize. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse but defiant. "You expect us to believe this display?" Krethver said. "You expect us to believe that your pathetic species has somehow built a fleet larger than anything in the galaxy? This is a trick. This is human deception." Daniel smiled patiently. "I anticipated that response, Ambassador. After all, words and images can be fabricated. You would be foolish to accept my claims without proof." He touched the control panel on the podium. "Which is why, approximately 4 hours ago, I authorized a demonstration." The holographic display changed to show a familiar location. Several ambassadors recognized it immediately and began murmuring among themselves. "This is Outpost Velthar 9, Daniel explained. "A military installation on the edge of Velkhari territory. According to your own records, it houses 12,000 military personnel and maintains heavy orbital defenses. Your strategic analysts have classified it as one of the most heavily fortified positions in your empire." Krethver's scales flickered with uncertainty. "What have you done?" Daniel did not answer immediately. Instead, he let the hologram speak for itself. The image showed the outpost as it had existed that morning. A massive space station surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol vessels. Then the timestamp in the corner advanced by 4 seconds. And the image changed. Where the outpost had been, there was nothing. Empty space. A few scattered pieces of debris drifting in the void. 12,000 Velkhari soldiers had simply ceased to exist. The chamber went absolutely silent. Even the ambassadors who had been whispering among themselves stopped to stare at the hologram in horrified disbelief. "One ship," Daniel said softly. "One weapon." For seconds, he let the words hang in the air before continuing. "The weapon is called a gravitational compression device. Our scientists developed it specifically for this purpose. It creates a localized gravitational field, roughly 1 million times stronger than normal. Everything within the field is compressed into a space smaller than an atom. There is no warning. There is no defense. There is no survival." Krethver had begun to tremble. His scales were now pure white, a color that indicated absolute terror among his species. "You murdered 12,000 of my people," he whispered. "Yes," Daniel agreed without hesitation. "Just as your people murdered 30,000 of mine 3 days ago. The difference is that we can do it again. And again. And again. As many times as necessary." He turned to address the entire chamber. "The United Earth Navy currently possesses over 600 gravitational compression devices. Each one is mounted on a vessel specifically designed for rapid deployment. We can strike any target in the galaxy within hours. Your defensive systems cannot detect our approach. Your weapons cannot stop our ships. Your shields cannot protect your worlds." He paused to let the information sink in. "I want to be absolutely clear about something. Humanity did not build these weapons because we enjoy killing. We did not spend 17 years preparing for war because we wanted conquest. We built them because the galaxy left us no other choice." His voice hardened as he continued. "Every species in this chamber has had the opportunity to help us. Every species has chosen instead to look away while our people suffered. You taught us that mercy is weakness. You taught us that compassion is foolishness. You taught us that the only thing the galaxy respects is the ability to destroy." He spread his arms wide. "Well, here we are. We have learned our lesson. We have become exactly what you made us." Ambassador Zaleth spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "Ambassador Harper, surely we can discuss this. Surely there is room for negotiation. The Council can reconsider its position on the Velkhari situation. We can provide compensation for human losses." "We can stop," Daniel interrupted. "Just stop." He shook his head slowly. For 50 years, humanity has asked this council for help. For 50 years, you have refused. Now, when you finally realize that we are capable of defending ourselves, you want to negotiate. You want to discuss compensation? You want to pretend that you are always on our side? He laughed. A short and bitter sound. No. The time for negotiation ended when the Valkyrie burned. Kepler 4 for 2b. The time for discussion ended when 7,000 human children died screaming while this council did nothing. He pointed at Krethfer. The Valkyrie. Dominion will surrender unconditionally within 30 standard days. They will release every human slave in their possession. They will pay reparations for every life they have taken. They will submit to military occupation until we are satisfied that they no longer pose a threat to human security. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. If they refuse, we will begin systematic destruction of their military installations. Then their industrial centers, then their colonies. We will continue until they surrender or until there is nothing left to surrender. He turned back to face the full chamber. And to every other species watching this broadcast, let me offer some advice. Humanity has a long memory. We remember every insult. We remember every time we asked for help and were refused. We remember every life that was lost because the galaxy decided we did not matter. He straightened his jacket and prepared to leave the podium. We are not seeking revenge against those who simply ignored us. But if anyone is considering taking advantage of this situation to harm human interests, I would encourage you to reconsider very carefully. Began walking toward the exit. Then stopped and turned back one final time. We spent 50 years pretending to be weak. We spent 17 years preparing for war. Imagine what we might accomplish if we spent the next 17 years preparing for conquest. He left the chamber without another word, leaving 400 species to contemplate a galaxy that had suddenly become very different from the one they thought they knew. The galaxy changed in the hours. Following Daniel Harper's speech, news spread faster than any ship could travel, carried by communication networks that connected every inhabited world. Within minutes, every major government knew what had happened in the Grand Chamber. Within hours, emergency sessions were being held on planets across the galaxy. The Valkyrie Dominion reacted first. Their high command gathered in a secure bunker beneath their capital city, surrounded by military advisors and intelligence officers. They reviewed the footage from the Grand Chamber over and over. Searching for any sign that the humans were bluffing, they found none. The destruction of Outpost Velthor 9 was confirmed by their own sensor networks. 12,000 soldiers had vanished in an instant, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The weapon the humans had described was terrifyingly real. Krethfer stood before the High Command and delivered his report in a voice that shook with barely controlled fear. He described Daniel Harper's calm demeanor, the massive fleet displayed in the hologram, and the cold certainty in the human ambassador's eyes. By the time he finished, several members of the High Command had already begun drafting surrender proposals. The debate lasted less than 6 hours. Some argued for resistance. Some demanded that they call the human bluff and trust in their own military strength. But the footage of Velthor 9 played on every screen in the bunker, and no one could explain how to defend against a weapon that offered no warning and no chance of survival. On the morning of the second day after Daniel's speech, the Valkyrie Dominion transmitted its unconditional surrender to Earth. The news sent shockwaves through the galaxy. An empire that had terrorized its neighbors for 2,000 years had collapsed in less than 48 hours. Species that had lived in fear of Valkyrie aggression suddenly found themselves witnessing something they had never imagined possible. The predators had become prey. Other governments began sending messages to Earth. Some were apologies for past behavior. Some were offers of alliance and friendship. Some were desperate assurances that they had never wished humanity any harm. Within a week, 14 species had formally apologized for historical grievances against human colonies. Within 2 weeks, Galactic Council had unanimously voted to grant humanity a permanent seat on the Security Committee. Daniel Harper watched all of this unfold from his small office on Station Harmony. He had not slept more than a few hours since his speech. His hands trembled whenever he tried to hold a cup of coffee. The weight of what he had done pressed down on him like a physical force. His assistant, a young woman named Katie Morrison, knocked on his door late one evening. She had been with him for 3 years, handling the endless paperwork and diplomatic correspondence that came with his position. She was one of the few people who understood how much the past week had cost him. "Sir," she said quietly, "the president is requesting a secure call. She says it is urgent." Daniel nodded and activated the communication screen on his desk. The face of President Maria Santos appeared, looking as exhausted as he felt. "Daniel," she said, "I wanted to speak with you privately before the official debriefings begin. Of course, Madam President." Maria was silent for a moment, studying his face through the screen. "You did something extraordinary," she said finally. "You saved humanity. Every analyst we have agrees that the Velkari were planning a major offensive within the next 2 years. They were going to try to wipe us out completely. Your speech stopped that. Your bluff stopped that." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. The bluff worked, but it was still a bluff. "I know," Maria replied. "That is why I wanted to talk to you." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "The gravitational compression device is real. The destruction of Velthar 9 was real. But the fleet you showed them does not exist. Not yet. We have maybe 800 combat vessels, most of them barely capable of defending our own systems. The 12,000 ships in your hologram were computer simulations." Daniel nodded slowly. "I am aware, Madam President. I helped design the simulations. The galaxy does not know that. Right now, every species in the Council believes that humanity possesses overwhelming military power. They are terrified of us. They are scrambling to make peace with us. They are treating us with respect for the first time in our history." She paused. "But eventually someone will figure out the truth. Someone will notice that our fleet never appears in multiple locations at once. Someone will realize that the numbers do not add up. When that happens, everything we have gained could collapse overnight." Daniel had thought about this constantly over the past week. He had known from the beginning that the deception could not last forever. The question was whether they could make it last long enough. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Our intelligence analysts estimate between 40 and 60 years before the deception becomes impossible to maintain. Maybe longer if we are careful. Maybe shorter if we make mistakes." Maria straightened in her chair. "Which is why we need to start building the fleet for real. Starting immediately. We need to convert our bluff into reality before anyone realizes it was a bluff in the first place." Daniel felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion wash over him. The plan had always been to buy time. He had just never expected it to work so well. "I understand," he said. "What do you need from me?" "Keep doing what you are doing. Keep being the terrifying human diplomat who made the galaxy tremble. Keep them afraid of us while we build the strength to back up our threats. We are going to need every year you can give us." Daniel thought about the role he had created for himself. The cold, calculating ambassador who had threatened genocide without blinking. The man who had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. It was a mask. But it was a mask he would have to wear for the rest of his career. "I can do that," he said quietly. Maria nodded. "I know you can. That is why I chose you for this assignment 7 years ago. I knew that someday we would need someone who could stand in front of the entire galaxy and lie without flinching. You were the only person I trusted to do it." The call ended a few minutes later. Daniel sat alone in the darkness of his office, staring out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velkari were preparing to hand over their weapons and release their human slaves. Somewhere out there, governments were rewriting their policies to accommodate the new galactic superpower. Somewhere out there, children were being told stories about the day humanity rose up and claimed its place among the stars. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew how close humanity had come to destruction. None of them knew that the great human fleet was nothing more than lights and shadows projected onto a screen. Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey and raised it in a silent toast to the empty room. 50 years, he whispered to himself. We bought ourselves 50 years apiece, built on the greatest lie ever told. He drank slowly, savoring the burn of the alcohol. I hope it is enough. Outside his window, the stars continued to shine. Indifferent to the small creatures who fought and schemed and dreamed beneath their ancient light, the galaxy had changed, but the universe remained the same. Cold, vast, unforgiving. Humanity had learned to survive in that universe. Now they would have to learn to thrive in it. Daniel Harper finished his drink, set down the glass, and began planning for the future. There was so much work left to do.